All right, strap yourselves in because today we're diving deep, really deep into something pretty ambitious. Amazon's Project Kuiper.
Hmm.
Ever imagine a world, like even the most remote places on Earth,
Yeah.
have crazy fast internet, all thanks to thousands, like a whole constellation of satellites just blanketing the planet.
What's really wild is that Amazon isn't just, trying to get everyone online. It's way bigger than that.
Yeah.
They want to basically make this network part of everything they already do, like their whole empire. You know what I mean?
Okay, so let's break this down. Amazon's all about services, AWS, their online store, the whole thing, right?
Right.
But how do satellites fit into all that?
Okay, so picture this. You buy something on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
But instead of like a delivery truck, it's a drone.
Whoa.
And that drone is using Kuiper's internet connection to fly straight to your house.
Whoa.
Or businesses, picture businesses being able to use data and run their apps from anywhere on the planet because Kuiper's hooked into Amazon's cloud services.
Right, right. So it's not just about internet access. It's like making everything Amazon does even more connected.
Exactly.
But hold on, didn't SpaceX already launch a bunch of Starlink satellites?
They did, yeah.
How is Kuiper different in this whole, space internet race?
Okay, so Starlink wants to be the main internet provider for everyone. But Kuiper, it's all about working with what Amazon already has.
Yeah.
Starlink's building a new highway, but Kuiper's adding super fast lanes to roads Amazon's already built. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see the difference in strategy now. But let's get into the nitty-gritty. We're talking thousands of these things in low Earth orbit, between 590 and 630 kilometers up.
Right.
Why so low, and how do they avoid, a giant space traffic jam?
Okay, so that low orbit, that's
Yeah.
key. It cuts down on latency, that annoying lag you get with satellite internet sometimes.
Okay.
Just aiming for super smooth internet, almost instant. And so those satellites don't turn into space junk. They've got these autonomous navigation systems.
Autonomous navigation? Like self-driving cars, but in space. How do they even do that with so many satellites whizzing around?
It's wild, right? You think of a super high-tech ballet where each satellite is constantly figuring out its path, using sensors to dodge other stuff, and talking to its neighbors to stay a safe distance apart. It's insane engineering.
Okay, you've officially blown my mind. This is way more complicated than I thought. But what about the environment? Launching that many satellites has to have some kind of impact, right?
You're right to ask that. Amazon knows this is a big deal environmentally. So they're designing these satellites with a cool trick: end-of-life deorbiting.
End of life what now?
It's like a self-destruct, but for a good reason. When a satellite gets old, it basically lowers its orbit and goes back into Earth's atmosphere and just burns up safely. No more space junk.
That's a relief. So they're thinking long-term about space, which is great. But let's zoom out a bit. Could Project Kuiper actually help close the digital divide?
Give internet access to communities all over the world that don't have it.
Exactly.
It's a huge possibility. One of the biggest benefits, for sure. Imagine remote villages in the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah.
Suddenly able to use online education, telemedicine,
That's incredible.
a whole world of information at their fingertips. The potential is mind-blowing, but there are real challenges too,
We're like, what? Because on the surface, it seems amazing. More internet is always good, right?
Right, but it's more complicated. First off, will people who need it most actually be able to afford Kuiper's internet? Can it compete with what's already out there?
That's a good point. It's got to be affordable to actually make a difference. But beyond the cost, are there any other downsides, things we might not be thinking about?
Absolutely. One thing that comes up a lot is data security and privacy. When you have a company like Amazon, controlling a network is huge. It makes you wonder, how are they handling all that data? Where's it going? What are they doing with it? It's a lot of power in one place.
You're right. It's not just about getting people online. It's about what happens after that. Okay, we've talked about the tech, the business side, and the potential impact. But before we go any further, I'm curious about the rules, the regulations. Who's making sure all this happens safely and responsibly, especially in space?
That's where the whole world needs to work together.
Yeah.
The FCC gave Amazon the okay for its first batch of satellites, but as things grow, we're in uncharted territory. We need clear rules about space junk, data security, making sure all those signals don't interfere with each other. It's a global project, so it needs global cooperation.
So it's not just a tech marvel. It's also about figuring out this whole web of international rules and agreements. Innovation doesn't just happen on its own.
It doesn't. It's like a car without brakes. Powerful, but could easily go off the rails.
Good analogy. Okay, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's recap what we've learned about Project Kuiper so far.
Okay, so we've seen just how massive this project is. Amazon wants to launch over 3,000 satellites to create a global internet network. We talked about the mind-blowing tech behind these satellites, the self-driving features, the communication links to make a seamless network.
And let's not forget Amazon's big picture goal. It's not just about internet, it's about integrating Kuiper into everything they already do, AWS, e-commerce, making this giant interconnected ecosystem.
Exactly. And we talked about the potential impact, the good stuff like connecting the unconnected, but also the need for rules for everyone to work together to make sure it's a success.
And of course, we can't forget those potential downsides, data privacy, making sure everyone can actually afford it. There's a lot to think about.
Definitely. We've barely scratched the surface, and already Project Kuiper is way more complex and fascinating than we imagined.
I think you're right about that.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the scale, the potential impact of this whole project to, like, blanket the Earth and internet.
That's a lot to take in. So let's look at some of the speed bumps Amazon might hit trying to make this thing a reality.
Okay.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of, like, space internet, but it can't be all smooth sailing, right? So what are some of the biggest challenges you see ahead for Project Kuiper?
Well, first off, just the sheer scale of this thing.
Yeah.
Launching and then managing. Like, over 3,000 satellites, that's not a walk in the park.
No kidding.
You got to coordinate all the launches, make sure they stay in orbit, make sure they can all talk to each other, and constantly be on the lookout for, like, potential crashes.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling, the logistics, the engineering.
It sounds like a nightmare, honestly. And then there's the money. Launching and running a network this big, that's got to be incredibly expensive.
You're not wrong. We're talking tens of billions of dollars, easy, over the next, like, 10 years. That's what people are saying.
Wow, that's a serious investment. It'll be interesting to see how Amazon plans to make their money back, make this whole thing actually profitable.
Yeah, definitely.
But what about the other guys? We talked about SpaceX's Starlink, but are there any other companies out there trying to get a piece of this space internet pie?
Oh, absolutely. Besides Starlink, you've got OneWeb, Telesat,
Right.
even some of the big telecom companies like Boeing. They're all investing in their own satellite internet constellations.
So it's a real space race then, huh? Multiple companies all trying to be the top dog. Do you think one company will eventually win out?
Or are we going to see a bunch of different providers, each kind of specializing in their own thing?
Yeah, like a more diverse market.
That's the big question, isn't it? It's hard to say right now. It's still so early.
Yeah.
But my guess is it's unlikely any one company will completely take over. We'll probably see a mix of providers offering different types of service, coverage, prices. Some might focus on specific regions, maybe specific industries, while others go for the global consumer market. It'll be interesting to see how things play out over the next few years.
Yeah, it sounds like the whole space internet scene is going to be really dynamic, always changing. Okay, let's go back to something we touched on before, the global impact of Project Kuiper.
Yeah.
You mentioned closing the digital divide, but how else could this tech change the world? Aside from, giving everyone super fast streaming.
The possibilities are endless, really. Think about, like, remote communities suddenly having access to telemedicine,
Oh, wow.
talking to doctors online, getting health care that they couldn't get before, or education for students in underserved areas and connecting them to online resources, global learning communities, and the potential for economic growth. Entrepreneurs in developing countries being able to access global markets, use digital tools.
It's really inspiring to think about the positive impact this could have on people's lives.
Yeah.
But as you said before, there are those downsides to keep in mind. What are some of the things we need to watch out for as this technology becomes more widespread?
One big concern that people bring up is, digital surveillance. You've got all these satellites watching the Earth.
Yeah.
There's a risk that governments or even corporations could use them for, like spying on people. That's a real threat to privacy and our freedoms. We need to have really strong safeguards in place to prevent that kind of abuse, make sure this tech doesn't become a tool for, the people in charge to control us even more.
You're absolutely right. It's a valid concern. And what about cybersecurity? With everything moving online these days, a network this big could be a huge target for hackers, for cyber attacks. Imagine if someone disrupted the network that, everyone relies on.
Right.
That would be chaos.
Cybersecurity is absolutely crucial, yeah. If a network like this went down, it could have massive ripple effects on everything. Global communications, finances, critical infrastructure.
It's scary to think about.
Yeah, it is. We need really, really strong security from the start, and we need to be constantly adapting to new threats as they pop up. This isn't something you can just set up and forget about.
You're right, it's a constant battle. What about the impact on local communities and economies?
Could a global internet provider like Amazon actually hurt local businesses, especially in places that haven't had widespread internet access before?
That's a great question, and one we shouldn't ignore. Any new tech can have unexpected consequences.
Absolutely.
And it's important to think about the impact on local markets. Like, if a global provider comes in with much lower prices, it could easily put local businesses out of business.
Right.
We have to be really careful to balance encouraging innovation and protecting those local interests.
It's a tough balance to strike, for sure. So it's not just about the technology. It's about how that technology interacts with, like, the social and economic fabric of different places. What about culture? Could bringing high-speed internet to remote communities lead to, like, the erosion of local traditions, languages, that whole idea of globalization making everything the same,
That's a really complex question. The internet has definitely played a role in globalizing culture, connecting people across borders, and that can be a good thing.
More understanding, more exchange of ideas. But it can also lead to, like you said, everything becoming the same, a loss of those unique local traditions.
Right. It's a double-edged sword.
It is. It's a delicate balance, and we need to approach it with sensitivity, with respect for different cultures.
You've given us a lot to consider. We've talked about the potential benefits of Project Kuiper, but also the potential pitfalls.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest concern as this technology continues to develop?
For me, it all comes back to responsible innovation. We have to be aware of the potential downsides, the unintended consequences, and make sure this tech is developed and used in a way that benefits everyone, not just a few. We have to prioritize things like sustainability, privacy, equity, and make sure no one gets left behind.
That's a great point. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement, the wow factor of space internet, but it is, at the end of the day, a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It really comes down to the choices we make.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Let's quickly recap some of the key challenges we talked about.
Sure. We started by talking about how difficult and expensive it is to launch and then manage all those satellites. Then we talked about the competition.
Right, all the different players in the space internet race.
Exactly. We also dug into the potential global impact, the good and the bad.
Yeah, the opportunities and the risks.
We talked about needing strong cybersecurity and about the concerns around increased surveillance, the potential for privacy to be eroded.
And we also touched on how this could affect local communities and economies, the need for sustainable development.
And the whole challenge of making sure all those satellite signals don't interfere with each other.
Right, the spectrum allocation issue.
Yeah, that's a big one. So in the last part of our deep dive, we'll switch gears and really explore the future of Project Kuiper and the whole space internet industry. Okay, buckle up, everyone. We'll be right back after a quick break. Welcome back. It's been quite a journey exploring Amazon's Project Kuiper, and it's obvious this is way more than just like getting faster internet, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's about like totally changing how we think about global connectivity. So let's look ahead, try to imagine where this whole space internet thing might take us.
What gets me really excited is that we're still just scratching the surface. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, it feels that way.
Satellite constellations, they can do so much more than just internet. Think about Earth observation, like keeping an eye on the planet from above, remote sensing, disaster response, even scientific research. It's like having a network of eyes in the sky, constantly watching, collecting data.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Like, how would disaster response be better with something like Kuiper?
Okay, so imagine a hurricane hits a coastal area, right? A bunch of satellites could be providing live images, data feeds, straight to the rescue teams on the ground. They'd be able to see the damage, coordinate relief efforts, even find survivors way more effectively.
It's like having a live, constantly updated map of the disaster zone. That's incredible.
Exactly. And it's not just Amazon doing this, What about the competition? What are the other companies doing to push the boundaries of this technology?
Right, like SpaceX with Starlink, what are they up to?
SpaceX is going all in on Starlink, yeah. They're expanding coverage super fast, experimenting with some crazy tech like laser links between satellites.
Hold on, laser beams between satellites? Is that even real? It sounds like sci-fi.
It might sound like Star Wars, but it's totally real, and it's a game changer.
Wow.
Laser links could make satellite networks way faster, way more responsive. And then you've got companies like OneWeb, Telesat. They're focusing on specific things like certain industries or bringing connectivity to super remote areas where it's just impossible to build traditional internet infrastructure.
It sounds like a whole new ecosystem is developing up there in space. But stepping back from all the tech, how do you see space internet affecting the world, like in the long term?
Well, if you think about how much the internet has already changed our lives,
Oh, yeah.
how we communicate, how we access information, how we do business,
Everything.
space internet could amplify all of that, take it to a whole new level.
Yeah.
We could be connecting billions of people who are offline right now, opening up incredible opportunities for education, healthcare, economic growth, cultural exchange. It's huge.
It's a really exciting vision, but, we have to remember those potential downsides we talked about before.
Right.
Data privacy, cybersecurity threats, the risk of disrupting local communities, economies. How do we balance the incredible potential of this tech with the need to do it responsibly?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one we need to be asking right now. This tech is so new, the possibilities are so vast, that we're basically making up the rules as we go.
Yeah, it feels that way.
We need countries to work together, transparent rules, and a real focus on ethics to make sure space internet benefits all of humanity, not just a select few.
It's almost like we're at the edge of a new frontier, full of promise, but also a lot of unknowns, potential dangers. What's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
We need to remember that the future isn't set in stone. We're building it right now, with every decision we make, every technology we develop, every rule we put in place. Space internet could change the world for the better, but it's up to us to make sure that happens.
That's a powerful thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Project Kuiper and beyond. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep looking up at the stars.